of environmentalism. In fact, it was a local school teacher there that was successful in running the New Zealand's first eradication on neighbouring Mary Island in 1960. Waiheke was also the first place to call itself nuclear free, and islanders are not shy to speak their mind or step up to a challenge. So the program really has been founded on decades of predator control and work, and nowadays more than 60% of the community are actively controlling predators, and there's more than 1,000 volunteers participating in community groups out of a resident population of 9,000. The way we began was in forming the Waiheke Collective in 2017, which is an informal network of people and organisations with shared conservation aims. And when the funding application to Predator Free 2050 was successful, the charitable trust Te Korowai Waiheke was launched. And the scope of work is a stoat eradication across the island and a rat eradication pilot. And you can see the three funders there that are worth thanking every opportunity, without whom we couldn't survive: Auckland Council, Predator Free 2050 Limited, and Foundation North. So this just gives you a bit of context. I'm sure many of you know where Waiheke is, but the context of Waiheke in Te Korowai, the Waiheke Gulf Marine Park, it sits right on the seabird superhighway between the Coromandel Peninsula and the Auckland mainland. It's the second largest island in the Waiheke Gulf, and so these factors mean that there's really exciting possibilities for biodiversity gains once it becomes predator free. Importantly, it's also a terrestrial and marine environment, so becoming predator free will support the seabirds as well as the forest birds. Waiheke is also surrounded, you can see there's some light green islands, they're predator free, or pest free islands in the Gulf. 44 of the 50 Waiheke Gulf islands are now predator free, and if you consider Waiheke being full of rats, and not so many stoats these days, but hopefully less and less, Waiheke is actually a source population of threat to these other islands. So it's a bit of a turnaround for the fear of these predators coming back to the island. Some more stats on Waiheke. So 9,000 permanent residents, about 9,200 hectares, and most of Waiheke is privately owned. There's a large business community, and certainly a lot of tourists. And so that's pre-COVID, but this year's obviously been a bit of a different year. Having said that, this summer is looking incredibly busy. There's lots of people around, and in fact, the hospitality industries are running out of staff, because normally there's a lot of itinerant international workers. So it's everyone's just feeling their way through the current situation. So I said 9,000 permanent residents. There's also a large part-time resident population. So about 2,000 households, holiday homeowners or batches. In the summer, the population swells to 50,000 or more, and there's a huge amount of diversity within that community. So there is, the island has some of the lowest incomes in the region, but also some of the richest in the country. There's a large range of ethnicities and backgrounds, a large Argentinian community, which has really helped the local football team. And very transient. Sometimes many times people will only stay for 2 to 3 years. And so what that means is that in the rat volunteer community, there's a turnover of about 50% every 2 years. What I'm trying to portray is that this is very much a people project. People are at the heart of the project. They're our biggest challenge and our biggest opportunity. So the local community, as they help the stoat eradication, reporting stoat sightings, they're donating rabbits for baits that they may be shooting on their own properties. They provide goods or services for free, voluntarily. Anything from helping out with field work through to communications or pro bono legal advice. And this is a map to show the blue area is council-owned land of Waiheke, and the orange is dock. And Within the island habitats, there's a large variety as well. There's coastal forest, there's inland forest, a lot of regenerating bush, there's some large wetland systems. There's obviously a lot of rural properties, open pasture, as well as horticulture, a lot of vineyards and olive groves on Waiheke. In the urban areas, there's suburban, more densely populated areas. There's peri-urban, where a lot of properties, join together through different gullies or bush reserves, and as well as industrial and commercial areas. So, how do you turn a community vision into an operational eradication program? Quickly. When we received the funding, there was a lot of expectation to just, get the traps out, just get the traps out. But actually, there's an awful lot that needs to happen before you can get the traps out. And the setup is really in the planning and creating these systems to sustain the program going forward. Things like the financial setup. You need someone to be paying the accounts. You need someone to be doing the payroll. Making sure the taxes are paid. You need legal support, help with contracts and business agreements. You need to be supporting staff and organisational setup, so recruitment, employment agreements, organisational policies, training. People need email addresses. We need a health and safety plan. You also need somewhere physical to locate yourself, an office and a workshop, and that took us a year on Waiheke to find. So ideally somewhere with a toilet, somewhere with a kitchen, and enough desks for a growing team. And of course people need computers and phones, and you need a printer, and you need workshop tools and uniforms and gear for all weathers and vehicles and signage, and in our case a very large freezer. So that all takes time. You need to have a good comm strategy to underpin all your work and good relationships with the local media and journalists. And when you do go starting to catch things, you need a good data management system to ensure that things are collected and be able to be analysed in a robust way. And of course, before you can lay traps out, you need relationships and permission from all the different landowners involved. Before you start trapping, you may also want to do some baseline monitoring in order to compare what you've done over time. So essentially, it was quite a lot of work. But stuff started at the beginning of last year, so around April, and we opened the traps in February this year. And so this is an overview of the stoat eradication. So over 300 properties are involved, and that's a bit of a list of the variety of properties involved. The fundamentals of the program is more than 1,500 DOC 200 traps laid at about 1 per 6 hectares. They follow linear features, so while they are kind of spaced in that way, they're placed on either a wetland edge or the side of a road or a track, and that's to follow where the stoat's path, but also ease of operations and trap checking. And the program is a 2-year tracking program followed by a 2-year confirmation period. Well, I say a 2-year tracking program, we have to see how things go, but this is the intention. And in terms of who's delivering the trapping, it's very much a team effort and many different partners. So over 50% of the traps are delivered by Te Korowai Waiheke staff, but the rest are managed by a range of delivery partners. So there's paid staff at the large farms. There are contractors employed by networks of neighbours. There is volunteers working on their own property. There is a community project, staff and volunteers at the regional park, existing Auckland Council contracts and local parks. So there's a range of people delivering the trapping program, and that they're glued together by the operational plan and by that robust agreed way of working towards eradication. But it does also require flexibility in terms of adapting to different needs. The large farms may not be able to do a trap run because they're lambing or that kind of thing. This is what it looks like on the ground. So each dot represents a trap, and each colour represents a different delivery partner. And I said before about the need for a really robust data management system. We are using an Esri product, ArcGIS Online, and that was really because we needed to have a way to integrate both the, what we might say, customer data, so that's landowner information, into the same space as the trap, both the location data and trap catch data, so that when the team are out there in the field, they are going to a trap and they need to understand what the gate code is to get into the property, so they need to be able to flick between these different systems, and it's all in the one place. So it's in the field, the team are using phones and the Collector app, and then you can see on the screen that it comes into these dashboards, management dashboards. We were very fortunate to receive an Esri Community Conservation Grant, which meant that the cost of licences was greatly reduced. And so the system records, I said, the location of traps, the trap records, also the maintenance of traps and auditing information. Bird count information is on there, the customer information is on there, health and safety, hazards and incident management is all geolocated on the system. We also have recorded areas of Kodi. There's no Kodi dieback on Waiheke, but we take the same precautions as if there was. And the stoat sightings, community stoat sightings, all on the same system. This is an example of a dashboard, so you can see, trap catch numbers and locations and type, and filter by species, all of that kind of thing. And across the top you can see the different dashboards that we have. In eradication, detection is critical. So the detection systems that we use is obviously the trap catch. We know if there are any there because we catch them in the traps. The community stoat sightings, which this graph represents. It also represents where most of the people are on Waiheke. So, but it's really useful. So we also have a camera monitoring program that runs twice a year, and we'll bring in detection dogs at the right time. But for example, in the what we'd say the quieter months of winter time, we may not be picking anything up on the cameras, and we may not be catching anything, but we have had the odd stoat sighting. So the eyes and ears of the community are really important in terms of being a detection tool. And biosecurity, again, for an eradication, super important. And Waiheke benefits from being surrounded by these predator-free islands, except for Ponui, which is more than a kilometre away, but there's no known stoats on Ponui. There are, in the Gulf, there's existing pest-free warrants on all commercial vessels, so the Fuller's Ferry and Sealink Ferry, they have really robust predator control programs through the Pest-Free Auckland, or Pest-Free Hauraki Gulf program run by Auckland Council and DOC. And then we work in partnership with both Auckland Council and DOC, looking forward to what might the improved biosecurity needs be certainly once stoats are gone, but once rats are gone as well. This is a map to show the distances between the islands. So stoats can swim a long way. They've been recorded as swimming certainly more than 4 kilometres and up to 5. But the closest point Waihere's to the mainland is more than 5 kilometres away. But there is the possibility of island hopping, and those other lines you can see between the islands represent that. And that may have happened with the stoat incursion on Watikuria and then Rajatapu. It's hard to know, but certainly something we look at closely. And this is why the wildlife and the benefits to wildlife of being predator free, and there's a lot of possibility for these birds to come back to Waiheke because of the proximity to these pest-free islands. In recent years, kaka have returned to Waiheke, and there's quite a lot of nests now in Waiheke. It's quite common to see kaka. There's been some sightings of kakariki, and predator-free program will support many more. And I put this in because it is really interesting in this game. You know, there's a lot of unsureness about whether or not eradication is possible, and what we get reminded of is that it's really about mindset. So this photo is actually a photo of Alistair Mcdonald, who did the eradication of Mary Island, and two of his students who did it with him, students that were then at Blackpool Primary, and that's Mary Island in the screen in the photo. Alistair said that when they went to the island and saw how the seabirds had been decimated by the rats, he just couldn't support it. And so he just had to do something. And so he did. And they were successful. And he does have quite a scientific and methodical mind in the brief conversations I've had with him, but you're not going to do it without trying. So it was great to have Alistair and his ex-students come back to Waiheke and reunite, and that points to the other thing that I think is important to note, which is that what's good for wildlife is also good for us, and I'm sure many of you know this instinctively. So through conservation actions, you're probably better connected to your communities. You may have broken through diversity barriers. You're more resilient and enabled, and you may be supporting local businesses or even employing people to coordinate and run programs. So projects like this are delivering social outcomes, not just conservation activity. And that's it. Any questions?
I wonder if you can comment on funding and funding sources as the trust has developed and gone along.
So we have the key funders, and we have a 5-year funding commitment from those funders. At this point, we haven't sought other funding other than in-kind contributions, and that's really because we're still working on the scope of the rat pilot. So we want to be, we take quite a cautious approach. We want to be very clear about what our funding gap may be and what that looks like before we go and ask for any further funding. Having said that, having a contribution from the large farms, for example, is a significant financial contribution, even if it's not cash.
Just wondering, because you're getting your volunteers using their phones, but what's the coverage like on Waiheke? Do you have black spots, and is that a problem, or how do they?
Yeah, we do. There's probably about 15-20% of Waiheke that doesn't have coverage, but the system is designed in such a way they can still put the trap records in and then just sync when they're back into coverage later on. So, yeah.
Well, Mary, there was a photograph where all the groups were about 3rd, 4th or 5th photo, and it was the top left-hand item. I was wondering what the trap was.
Oh, hang on. Oh,
that's
this
it.
one?
Yes.
So that's Phil. Phil was he managed Rotorua Island for many years. That is a Dr. 100, but it's a plastic version rather than a wooden box version. Yeah. So we have about 500 of those traps, and the others are wooden boxes. Yeah.
Why have you decided to focus on stoats instead of rats? But I see rats are in your catch as well.
Yeah.
What's the sort of balance there?
Yeah. So the program is a stoat eradication first and island-wide, and that's partly, well, there's a couple of reasons, but there was a stoat pilot project run on Waiheke in 2016. So there was some good information that came from that in terms of landowner acceptability, in terms of tools, and also training locals to deliver the trapping. And I'd say the other reason is that because the stoat program has tools at a far less dense network across the island, so 1 per 6 hectares as opposed to potentially, for bait stations to a hectare or for traps to a hectare for rats. there was a sense that if we try with that and you bring the community along with you, so for example in Wellington the Miramar Peninsula ran a possum eradication about 10 years ago I think, and then more recently they've run a rat and mustelid eradication, and having the context of the possums being successful